Okay, well, good morning and welcome to the sixth of our six-session series for the spring of 2001 and the end of winter for 2020-21. We're excited about today's session, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Russ Simons. Russ?
Hey, good morning, everybody. Super excited to have everybody here. This is the sixth and last of this current group of webinars. We genuinely appreciate everybody's attendance. It's caused a lot of interesting dialogue and given us a real opportunity to think about the other things that we need to do to prepare our industry to reopen. So very, very grateful for your participation and your feedback. I want to throw it over to Mark Herrera from the International Association of Venue Managers for a few quick remarks. Mark.
Hey, thank you, Russ, very much. Thank you, Richard Anderson, for, you know what, it's great to be the dumbest guy in the room. Paul Lyott always talk about that, and I'm that guy today. What an awesome group of industry experts that are on this call. First of all, you know, the International Association of Venue Managers understands as the world continues to change, the importance of continuing professional development changes as well. So we have partnered, obviously we have a really strong partnership with the Venue Solutions Group. You know, again, we play an important role in supporting our members, right? Other organizations and all respective communities during these turbulent times, and realize the importance of continuing our education within all commercial facilities and all the facilities that are being managed. So since March and beyond, we have continued to provide our members global insights, you know, throughout the pandemic, through dedicated research that we gathered on the perspective on how our facilities are being impacted and how are they adapting, you know, to the current conditions. So we continue to explore the tensions brought about by this crisis and the need for collaboration, as we have done with the Venue Solutions Group, and try to solve them as we jointly continue to assess all the different risks. So we've really focused on four things. We have focused on sharing and transparency. Understanding that real-time sharing of data was very critical and important. Working together for the win-win outcomes, partnering where the need was the greatest, focusing on the problem solving and the compromise. So focusing on problem solving and, you know, ready to resolve issues, which we did collectively, and we continue to do so. And of course, lastly, the most important thing was the empathy to understand each other's needs. What is it that everybody needs during this time of crisis? Because everybody's being strained. So one of the things that we have done is collaboratively with the Venue Solutions Group and led by, you know, Russ Simons, Tom Williams, Mike Woolley, and obviously IAVM, was to build and develop something that has been in place for some time and has just continued to evolve, is the Venue Operations Summit. This summit is going to take place in October, and it's basically assuring that all the venues and facilities are properly equipped, you know, to manage event post-crisis. That's essential to event risk management. So IAVM, in collaboration with the Venue Solutions Group, is proud to present the Venue Operations Summit. This is the premier industry conference for public assembly management or facility operations and engineering professionals. You know, some of the past topics that we have had included, you know, leadership, risk management, housekeeping, vertical transportation maintenance, electrical system management, venue-specific town halls, and life safety, and the list just continues to go on. But regardless of the venue type, this is the summit where attendees can be assured of a program that's going to provide actionable information to assist them in their facilities responsibilities, along with very valuable networking opportunities, which will be held in Indianapolis, and the registration will go up in and around the beginning of May. So we're excited to work collectively to say, you know, hey, we're going to provide something to the industry that will better equip them, you know, to manage the current risk, you know, and the unknown and the uncertainty. But again, the most important thing is to protect the number one asset is people. So we're going to do it collectively with these industry leaders that I just mentioned. With that, thank you for the time and being a part of your day. I'll kick it back over to Russ unless anyone has any questions.
No, Tom, it's all yours.
Great, thanks, Russ, and thanks, Mark. Thanks for being here and talking about the summit. We really hope that we'll be able to see a lot of you folks in August, at the end of August in Indianapolis. So before we get going, we have one housekeeping note. We are going to answer every question that you've got. So if you've got a question now or towards the end of the presentation or the discussion, please use the little chat button at the bottom, or the Q&A button rather, and we will get to every question. So just because we set this thing for an hour doesn't mean we're going to stop at the 60-minute mark. We'll keep going until we get everything answered. So today we're looking at really your full-time staffing. The COVID pandemic did not leave anyone untouched in our industry. So you had to let a lot of folks go. You had to scale back. So what we want to talk today with our three panelists is what they did to prepare themselves to come back and ramp back up. So let me do some introductions about our esteemed panelists. We've got Kim Baker, the president and CEO of Kentucky Performing Arts. Kim leads the region's largest cultural center, which includes the iconic Kentucky Center, the historic Brown Theater, and the newly constructed Old Forester's Parish Town Hall. During her tenure, Kim has led a visionary strategic plan expanding KPA's footprint throughout Louisville and Kentucky, while overseeing the reconstruction of the Kentucky Center following a serious construction fire in the summer of 2018. And before coming to Kentucky Performing Arts, Kim held a variety of leadership positions in venues throughout Lexington and Louisville. And we also have Mubarka Butt, a people and corporate strategist. She's an experienced people strategist with past roles at SaskTel Center as a chief strategy and people officer, and with the city of Saskatoon as manager of people strategies, where she designed and deployed programs that shifted culture and improved engagement. From people strategies and diversity and inclusion to corporate strategic planning and corporate governance, Mubarka has aligned organizations to their mandates and desired future states by delivering clear roadmaps to define successes. And last, but certainly not least, is Antony Bonavita, the EVP of Venue Operations for the Cleveland Cavaliers and Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse in Cleveland. Antony is responsible for the day-to-day operations, guest experience, ticket operations, and project management. He's responsible for all event bookings with a focus on maintaining the arena's status as one of the busiest venues in the world. And his scope includes all venue operations under the Cavaliers organizational umbrella, which includes the Cavaliers Team Training Center, Cleveland Clinic Courts, the Legion Lair, their esports team, as well as the organization's facility operations interests in Canton, Ohio, home of the G League affiliate Canton Charge. Antony's also played a leading role in the 2-year renovation and construction process as part of the massive transformation of Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. So we appreciate their time today and their experience, and I know that they're going to have a wealth of information for you. So let's just kind of take a quick setup here. Each of these folks had their own way to achieve their org structure review, and so with no offense to PETA, there is more than one way to skin a cat. But at the end of the process, they got to a place where hopefully they're better than where they started. So it's important to know that this kind of exercise is not just related to COVID. If you're adding a new venue, a significant venue to your complex, you might need to add some staff. If you had a venue leader or a department head that has departed for whatever reason, you might want to take a look and see, did we operate in the best way possible under this person's leadership? But for today's purpose, we'll look at everything in light of COVID because it's had such a significant effect. So if you were fortunate at COVID, maybe all you had to do was reduce pay for staff to get yourself through. But then you got to furloughs and you got to terminations where you maybe eliminated positions entirely, if not just the person themselves. You reduced probably your services. So, you cut your landscaper loose and the remaining staff, your marketing director's out there cutting grass once a week. And that's just because you did what you had to do. So, along with the personal heartbreak of having to let folks go, you lost a lot of institutional knowledge that you may or may not get back. So in essence, you're starting from ground zero in a lot of certain areas. So why would you want to do this? You got to ask yourself some questions. Do you want to go back and do things the old way? Are you confident that was the best way to do things from a structure standpoint? Is there a more efficient way to do it? Can you combine some departments? Can you create a new department head that might have some responsibilities that were spread amongst a couple of people in the past? And then you can revisit positions where maybe there wasn't a good fit. If there's ever a silver lining, maybe a small silver lining in this exercise, it's that you may have eliminated positions where people were not a good fit, and now you can build back with folks that will be better for the organization as you move forward. And as you all know, organizational structures evolve over time. people come and go. You play to people's strength. You add duties as necessary, as your job description would say. And after a number of years, you realize you look nothing like when you started. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's not. But with COVID reducing your staff significantly, then this is good. This is as good a time as any to take a look at what you got and where you want to be. So let's get our panelists going. Enough hearing from me. We've got some questions we want to ask them, and Kim, I think we'll start with you. So what caused you to determine that you needed to look at your organizational structure, and kind of what are the things that went into that decision to move forward with that kind of process?
Well, thanks, Tom. I think, actually listening to your introduction, I feel like you touched on a bit of everything that we have been experiencing over the past couple of years. So for us, really, this has this ramp up. It started several years ago for us to decide that we needed to review our organizational structure. And it started when we took on a big expansion. And, the Center, Kentucky Performing Arts, at one time was just one location, the Kentucky Center, that had three theaters within it. And then as a strategic move, we really, to be proactive in growing arts and culture in our region and increasing economic development and cultural tourism, we purchased a historic property, the historic Brown Theater, and we built Old Forester's Paris Town Hall, which was a new standing room venue that could accommodate touring artists, but could also support our performing arts organizations here in the Louisville area. And so with that, we went through an incredible amount of change, and we started feeling pain points. And we did an organizational redesign at that time, knowing that we were going from a single location to a campus. But we were definitely having pain points. And all of a sudden, there was significant capital responsibilities with, a facility that's 35 plus years old here at the center. We had a historic theater that was over 100 years old, and we had this kind of new contemporary space. So we really knew that there were some challenges that we needed to look into with organizational structure. And then the pandemic hit, and we really had to do what I call what I say was the unimaginable, which is we ended up furloughing the majority of our staff, 90% of our staff, and we went from 100 employees down to a little under 15 employees. We had a lot of terminations. We did salary reductions, and it's been very challenging. But as you said, if there's any small silver lining, and it is very small, does give you an opportunity to pause and say, okay, we know that when we come back, we want to be ready to thrive and really take a time to reimagine what the model looks like and what it could be. So that's our story, basically. We had some pain points going into the pandemic. The pandemic hit, and we want to ready ourselves and equip ourselves as best we can for when we reopen, hopefully here in a few months.
Great. And actually, going back to as you were ramping up prior to the pandemic with your new additions, with Old Forester's Paris Town Hall, I think that sort of represented a event potential that you all hadn't really had to deal with in the past. So in addition to just getting bodies to maintain the facility, that kind of gave you a whole new world of booking that you all really weren't terribly experienced in.
Yeah, that was another big pain point that we wanted to look into, and that was really, as you've said, we had some partners in place, but that project really grew in a wonderful way, and it became a much larger project. And so that the partners that we had in place really, we weren't able to drive the number of events that we needed. So some recommendations came from you all that we're now exploring and working with, just so that we can kind of maximize all of the booking capacity that we have across all of our venues, really.
Sure. No, that's a great setup for your particular building. And Antony, if you're prepared, you have a bit of a different approach that you're constantly looking at your organization. Can you kind of talk about what you all have done up to COVID and maybe what COVID had an effect on that process?
Sure. Well, good morning, everybody. And I just want to comment on Mark Herrera's comment. Usually, I think Russ is the dumbest person in the room, so you don't have to worry. As long as you're in the room with Russ, you're fine. So for us, we had an interesting, number of years here. And so prior to the pandemic, We obviously came off a 4-year of NBA Finals run. We renovated our facility and expanded it, and then obviously had some new ingress plans. So overarchingly, we were already looking at our staffing models, right? So you have our part-time staffing models, but also it affects our full-time staffing models. So we were looking at that as an organization. We believe that your lack of evolution leads to extinction. So we want to make sure that we're consistently evolving. I would say that the pandemic actually, in our case, paused our restructuring because we didn't want to be. We're very, very fortunate to have a tremendous ownership group that did not ask us to furlough people. We kept our employees employed throughout the pandemic. So in our case, it actually paused our restructure, and we didn't actually make any restructuring until we got back to work, which was in December, and we restructured some positions throughout the organization to have us be a little more efficient and a little more aligned moving forward. I agree that these are opportunities. If you don't take them, shame on you. Any opportunity you have to take a pause and look at your business. Obviously, this is a terrible situation that we're all in, and obviously it's not something you wish to happen ever again. But in that situation, we tried to come out of it, or trying to come out of it as a better organization. And so, we really dug in and just tried to figure out where are our most critical assets, and we want to invest in people. And in order to do that, we had to make some subtractions in order to make investments. And so that's what we did. It was a very small percentage overall of our 500 plus employees. And I'm very proud of the group. I'm very proud to work for this organization. We tried to stay relevant. We tried to recreate ourselves through the pandemic to keep our brand alive and keep our industry was obviously the most impacted, throughout this. And so, for us, we just tried to find any opportunity we could to stay relevant. And I don't want to get into the other questions about how we got into it, so I'll just pause there, and hopefully that answered the question overall. And happy to go deeper if there's any questions from the group.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I think if the biggest takeaway from just what you said is the fact that you're constantly, unless there's an impediment, you're constantly looking at your organization. So you're the proverbial rolling stone that gathers no moss, so that you can, I'm sure that allows you to stay ahead of issues that may pop up otherwise if you just sat and waited till, hey, let's just do it. That constant review is a tremendous benefit to your organization.
Well, Tom, the only thing I'd add there is that it's easier said than done, right? To just evolving and stay. There's definitely things that I allowed and permitted and promoted in some ways, and over time, if you're not constantly, monitoring what's going on within your staff and people, when you look back, it'll be 5 years and you're like, why is this a problem? Well, it's been a problem for 5 years. You just haven't been paying attention to it. And it's much harder to make those adjustments. And so you're not always going to get lucky and have people leave the organization on their own. So when you have a problem, you need to dig in and make sure you take care of that problem.
Yep, that's great. I look forward to it. We'll circle back with you on sort of the steps and how you kind of go about that. But I want to give Mubarka the chance to talk about what her experience was in determining, what factors went into doing your own review. And yours was a little bit different. Yours was a little more almost data driven, which I may be jumping ahead, but go ahead and hit the high points of what led you to do this internal review.
For sure, Tom. Thank you. So we actually didn't end up laying people off immediately after COVID, and we wanted to wait it out a little bit too. And part of the reason for that was that in Canada, there were some government subsidized wage subsidies available. So we wanted to see if we would be eligible for that. And obviously our goal was to retain our staff for as long as possible without causing any damage to the corporation. We had some really good talent in the organization. So we ended up waiting until July before we did our first set of layoffs. But even then, those layoffs were very obvious and hands-on positions where there just was no obvious work due to having no events. So once we had reached that and we were eligible to receive some government funding for wage subsidy, we had a little bit of more time to plan out how we wanted to proceed with the organizational effectiveness review. So we knew at the time that our intent was to reduce our capacity precisely, rather than just do, mass layoffs. And at the same time, we wanted to achieve cost savings, but not lose the top talent. So we kind of took a different route, and we didn't start our organizational effectiveness review until November. And part of the reason for the delay was having the government wage subsidy that we were receiving in Canada.
Well, because you are a little bit different than you took a different approach, why don't we just stick with you and kind of tell us now we're going to get into the meat of this conversation. Kind of what were the steps you took to do this internal review?
For sure. The first step was to identify our expectations and what it was that we wanted out of the review. We knew that our employees were no longer working at full capacity. That was obvious. We just didn't know exactly what the percentage of that reduction was that was impacting our operations. So we developed a job analysis questionnaire, had our employees, each of the currently active employees, complete the job evaluation job analysis questionnaire, and really break down their tasks as they were tied to their job description pre-COVID, and break it down by the hours or the amount of time they were now spending on doing those tasks. We also asked them to look at new tasks that were created as a result of the post-COVID environment that they had taken on, and what were the things that were keeping them busy. We then had their managers fill out a separate review, separate job analysis questionnaire for each of their employees, and share their perspective on what percentage they think each employee was spending on each of those tasks, and also kind of verify some of the newer tasks that had come about as a result of COVID. And then the questionnaire targeted to their department, specifically where we wanted to find out where were the efficiencies that could be gained. So it wasn't just about what are you doing, but what are some of the things that you could do better. And so we really wanted to hear from the employees, and they came forward and shared that. And one of the things I guess I do want to mention, and we haven't really talked about this, is that this type of a process does create hostility amongst the workplace, and people don't feel comfortable going into an exercise like this, I think, in the best of times. So during COVID, it was definitely one of the things that we were very cognizant of and aware that people were uncomfortable, but it was also kind of the necessary thing for the organization to do. Once we got them to complete the job analysis questionnaires, then on our part, we did further kind of a double layer of an analysis where it was quantitative analysis, and we mathematically determined a number using their tasks and the amount of hours they were allocating to each of the tasks, what percentage of a full-time equivalent they were functioning at. So we actually did a comparison of a before FTE, which they were at 100% FTE, if not more, given that we're event-driven. But then we actually were able to see how much their capacity had reduced by. And I think, so that's very kind of procedural and I think standard practice. But one of the things that we did when it came to presenting those percentages was we wanted to really see what was the best way that we could provide this information to the decision makers, in this case, our board of directors, to share with them options that they could consider in how to make the decisions based on our findings. So we built out 4 different test scenarios for the organization, where scenario A, we said if we were to function as status quo, here's where you could keep all the capacity for all the employees. And we defined what scenario A was. There's no events coming in, but let's say we reduce everybody by 10%, and this is what the outcome would look like in terms of cost savings. In scenario B, we said, let's say we actually have the option to have small events and do some rentals, then our focus shifts to strategic planning. And then in this case, we could consider the following options in terms of reductions, and here would be the cost savings. And there was a scenario C where there were no events and we were only in maintenance mode, and the focus was on strategic planning. And our 4th scenario was full building closure. So we really wanted to give our key decision makers all the different options that were available for them to consider in terms of how far they wanted to go with the cost savings. So I think that was really important. And one of the best outcomes of this process that we ended up developing was an organizational functionality matrix. We broke down everything that every function that was performed within the organization, right from the front line, right to the top, into 3 key areas. One was operational focus, the second was tactical, and the third was strategic focus. And our first assessment that we completed on that functionality matrix looked at it from the perspective of pre-COVID. How did we function before COVID happened? How much percentage of, if 100% of our time is supposed to be distributed in those 3 key areas, being operational, tactical, and strategic, how much were we spending on operational, tactical, and strategic before COVID happened? And then how much are we spending in each of those areas right now? So that gave us all, it was a great finding for us and learning through the process that we arrived there, but it gave all of us a really good perspective on where we are right now. And once we do get ready to reopen and things start shifting back to normal, how much of that focus do we need to start shifting from tactical to strategic? So anyway, really great exercise. So much learning came out of it. I think we did more than what I would say is a standard practice for an organizational effectiveness review. So really pleased with the outcomes.
Sure. Wow. That sounds like it's a very intensive process. How long did it take kind of from start to finish? Because you obviously had everybody filling out, questionnaires, and then leadership had to review, and you had to double check were people being honest in saying what their workload was? Yeah.
So good question. Actually, we were under a very pressuring timeline. So we had to complete this project in 1 month. So we managed this from start to finish in 4 weeks. And that's not a normal timeline. And so for anyone listening who thinks that this is how you should do it, I would advise that maybe take a little bit longer. But we felt that we didn't get a head start on it because we started in November. We had to wrap it up as soon as possible before a new budget year started so that some decisions could be made.
Sure.
But as far as identifying redundancies, one of the steps that I missed was, in addition to completing the questionnaires, there was an interview process where we allowed the employees to explain what they had completed in the questionnaire. And we thought that that was really important for engaging the people as well that were involved in doing the work. And it became very obvious after going through a few interviews within one team, and even within the cross sections of different teams, that there were redundancies. Sometimes some process was being repeated a certain way by 4 people, and not so much that maybe people were being dishonest, but maybe they were unaware of the redundancies that existed and the duplication of work that was happening. So a really great learning experience.
Yeah. Wow. That's fascinating. Just that process that you went through. And Antony, yours is probably a little different. Can you talk about kind of what you do when you're doing these internal organizational reviews?
I was really hoping you were going to go to Kim because I didn't want to follow that. I mean, wow. 4 weeks.
No, we know you're the guy that can follow Mubarka.
No way. It's like following the Beatles. No way. So I think, again, our organization is, uniquely structured in that we have multiple properties, and we have a large ownership group that has a large business that obviously is doing very well, right? And so we had a little bit of like two ends of the spectrum. I think, first of all, our immediate reactions in March were, how do we stop the bleeding? What do we need to do in order to, make sure? Let me back up by saying everything we did was around care and people, right? We wanted to focus on how do we get through this process by caring about our people, how we handle this and how we should deal with it throughout this process, whatever the timeline was going to be. And if you remember back March of last year, we didn't know anything, right? We didn't know if it was going to be a month, 2 months, 3 months. We had no idea that we'd be sitting here March 31st and still talking about this. So for us, it was about how do we do what we say we're going to do, live by our cultural values and care about people. So the first thing we had to do is come out of, shut things down. And it's surprising, I know a lot of you probably feel the same way, how much goes into thinking about what a shutdown looks like. We've never had to think about a shutdown before. And so even shutting down our business took an enormous amount of time and resource allocation, and realizing where we could make spend cuts without infecting our staff. Right, because that's a big piece of it. Utilities, for example, we shut the building down. We basically just brought it down to minimal lighting. In a big building, 850,000 square feet, it's a lot of electric that we use all the time. And so, that was a piece that helped us continue to manage. We also, from an organizational perspective, and again, my business within our larger business is that we did the same thing Mubarka did, which is we gave our ownership group a number of different scenarios. This is what it looks like if we do X. This is what it looks like if all the executives take a pay cut. This is what it looks like here. We did all the same type of structurings, but in that we never had any mass layoffs. That was our goal, was to not have a mass layoff. We had some structural changes and things that we were going to do regardless of COVID that we were going to implement at a specific time. But we talked about, salary reductions. We obviously froze, any salary increases every year, right? We run on from July 1 to June 30th. We were right on the cusp of doing, salary increases and promotions and all those things. And we froze all of that. We went to our union partners and negotiated freezes on their wages. So we had to get into the nitty-gritty details in order to just, again, stop the bleeding and understand where we're going to be for able to maintain over a number of months. And that was our first, bite at the apple, was understanding that. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out how we could stay relevant and what resources we needed to allocate there. And what I mean by that is we had people that weren't necessarily doing a certain task or being involved in a certain task, and we got them involved because we knew that they didn't have, a lot to do in their, the box office, even though, again, a lot of work was in there for shutting down shows and refunds and all that stuff. It was months worth of work, just kind of unpiling and managing that process. And so we utilize people in different ways in order to get ourselves structured to be able to sustain a number of months. When we realized we were coming out of this, or hopefully we're going to be coming out of this, basketball was coming back. We were going to be able to have events in that we were starting to open up a little bit. Then we got into our business piece modeling and understand who are the right people in the right spot on the bus, right? We say on the bus, right? But are they in the right spot on the bus? I mean, people want to be on the bus, but they may not be in the right seat. And so we spent a good deal of time, analyzing the people that we had and looking what they're passionate about. What could they be really good at? And are they in the right position? And if they weren't, we tried to have honest conversations with them. Some people left on their own. Some people we had to entice to go find their happiness somewhere else. But we knew we wanted to come out of this thing stronger and leaner and in a much more collective group. Organizational culture gets talked about. I don't know about any of you, but culture is a very difficult thing to navigate in this environment. It's extremely difficult to get to know people. I had the luxury of having to hire, and I say luxury because we weren't hiring anybody, hire a new vice president of security and risk management. I've been in the same room with the gentleman for like 4 times over the last 5 months that he's been here. Right? Think about that. Other than at games and stuff where we see each other, literally in the same room, we've only been in the same room about a handful of times. And so even that process of getting somebody on board and navigating through a new organization takes a lot of extra effort in this environment. And so we wanted to be sensitive to that. We wanted to, put them in the best position to be successful. I think, again, for us, we've tried to be as caring about the people we have and making sure we just weren't trying to navigate to a bottom number, because that's not how our organization functions. We knew it was going to be painful from a financial standpoint, but we're hopeful that if we maintain these people and invest in them over the course of the past year, that as we come out of this thing, they will work harder and be more loyal and passionate about this organization as we emerge from this, incredibly difficult situation.
Yeah, no, that's great. Going back to your sort of description of the right people in the right seat on the bus, what did that analyzing of their skills, what did that look like? Was that just conversations with them, and then you kind of took back their feedback of where they thought they were, and you put your own, you put your own input because you know them? Was it like Mubarka, where they actually filled out something so you could get a sense of where they think they are? What did that kind of look like?
Yeah, we didn't get as structured as Mubarka did, but we definitely, did, reviews and tried to, have conversations with, and I'm not going to get into specifics groups, but we got conversations around the organization about, look and how people were engaging and what their engagement was like, and trying to understand, and then, tried to have honest conversations with people. I would say this, and I know Russell will make fun of me, but being a New Yorker originally, I trust my gut a lot, and I get my gut feeling tells me that something's not right, that we need to look into something. Then I trust it and I go with it and I try to look into it. And I think if you have conversations and you really are sincere and honest with people, and then ask them specifically, how they're doing, they're going to tell you. If you provide that environment, they're going to tell you. And I think we did that, and I think we learned a lot by just listening, and not taking everyone's opinions to extreme levels, but like you hear something once, you're like, okay. You hear something twice, you're like, here's something 3 times. In my experience, there's something you really need to pay attention to. And so we did that, and we really leaned in, and we made some difficult decisions and said, again, we're going to make this decision, or you can make the decision. And ultimately, a lot of people in our case made their own decision and realized that ultimately they weren't going to be successful here, because now we were more focused on them. The last thing I'll say here is, what you permit, you promote. At the end of the day, it was on me. Again, you get lost in being busy. 4 NBA finals run, $250 million transformation. I can give you all the excuses in the world, but ultimately it was because I wasn't paying attention that we let some of these things go. And now that we had time to focus on it, we had no choice but to address it. And so I would just say, don't be me. If you want something to be the case, then promote it. And even if you leave it alone, it's going to create its own narrative. So whatever culture, whatever organizational feel you want to have to live it and breathe it and make sure you're nurturing it and watering it every single day. And being busy took me away from that, and I wasn't paying attention to what was happening. And so I will try not to make that same mistake moving forward.
Sure, man, that's some sage advice. So let's move from New York background to Kentucky background, which is a little different between themselves. So Kim, talk about what the steps you all took to look at your organization.
Okay, well, I mean, first of all, we did a lot of different scenario planning, as the other panelists described, when we figured out how are we going to get through, this pandemic, this time of shutdown. So, but at that point, it's time to start looking forward. How do we kind of reinvent ourselves during this time? And we did, a lot of different kinds of community programs that were outside and digital programs. But in addition to that, how are we going to reemerge? How are we going to move forward? So first of all, I have 2 boards of directors. They're awesome community leaders. One's a foundation board of directors. The other's an operations board of directors. And the first thing I did was I said, part of, we've got to be sustainable when we come out of this, and it's going to take, several years. And we're doing scenario planning on looking at how, what's our business going to look like for several years. But the big piece of that is, the people, and how, what is that structure going to look like? It's got to be different. So what are some of the things that we can do, in that structure to help us be sustainable, help us kind of grow with the business, all of those types of ideas. And we talked about doing some RFP work, and then we really said, we need some outside help. We need some outside help to help us figure out what are the areas that we really need to look at. And that's when we found Venue Solutions Group. So I guess the first thing that we did was we found you all to help us look at our operation and our organization. And working with VSG, we really just got a great mix of stakeholders. So we had board members, we had organizations that use our facilities, and our staff, and all of those individuals were interviewed, and they were interviewed privately by VSG, so that it was interesting. We had some different board members that kind of wanted to be in on some tours, and we just made sure that those were very private conversations, so that people could feel comfortable saying what they needed to say, and that's what happened. So I think from that, we were able to see, well, what are some things that go across different departments, different areas? What are some of the positives? That was a great part of this. Is there were some really wonderful things that came out, some things that weren't broken. What are some things that we need to focus on? Where are some synergies? And so we we're able to get the recommendations and then kind of look at, okay, what else? And I will say that during this, we kind of went into it with one project in mind, was to really look at our organizational structure. But as I talked about earlier, there were some things that we needed to also figure out at this time of shutdown, like our booking protocols and processes for a campus of venues that we added to the scope of the project. So we really took it as an opportunity to look at multiple things that would improve the business at the same time. So I guess that's what I would say. I would second what the other panelists have said, that, it's a very difficult time for people right now. You've got, I don't know about your organizations, but we have employees that have worked with us. We just had a 30-year anniversary, 20-year anniversary, 10-year anniversary. I mean, people love what they do. It's a labor of love. We call it, the type of work that we do is a lifestyle job, call it a lifestyle job.
For sure.
And I think that, tensions are high. And so we just made sure that we were really transparent about why we were doing this for sustainability, tried to involve people in the process and explain along the way what the results that we were finding, and just be very, very sensitive, because we need our employees right now. We need them to get through this. They have, you said, they have the passion, they have the history, they have the commitment, and they are part of the future of what. So really kind of thinking about how we can integrate those key and important employees into whatever changes we make into the future has been central to the work that we've been doing.
Right. So based on having gone through the review process, are there any big takeaways that maybe you weren't expecting, or maybe you were expecting and it met your expectations? Any big takeaways or anything you would have done differently through the process to kind of get to where you are?
Well, I'll start with what I probably would have done differently, and that's, I would have done this sooner. We had, as we were growing as an organization and expanding, we also had a really terrible facility construction fire that we had to work through, and we stayed open and operational. But, the majority of our lobbies were full of scaffolding. And so for over a year, we really had to keep conducting business and major shows and activities through the fire. But, like you said, there's really, it all falls on, take ownership for that. The organization was really stretched at the same time we were expanding, dealing with this type of issue. So, I probably would have said, okay, as we are growing and expanding, let's get some outside perspectives to really look at some different scenarios, as opposed to doing that in-house, kind of making some assumptions in-house on what we knew or how we operated. So I think that would be the one thing I would do differently. And it goes to that idea of, this is something that you continually need to be doing, evaluating your business and your people and your model, make it part of, the culture. So make questioning part of the culture in the most positive of ways. But I'd say some takeaways from the process are really, as I mentioned earlier, there's some things that are really working well and some things that don't need to change. And really, we wouldn't benefit from outsourcing certain functions that we have in-house right now. But there are other parts of our operation that we see as a priority really it would benefit us. Engineering is one of the top things that would benefit if we looked at that, at somebody coming in, so that we could really do more preventive maintenance, so that I can do my job better in raising capital funds and taking, kind of long-term care and stewardship of the facilities that our foundation owns and that the Commonwealth owns. So, so I think really it's that idea of priorities. I think what was surprising, I really loved it, because as we're a performing arts organization, we're the largest presenters of performing arts, in this region. But as you mentioned earlier, how do you open up what you do to really make it as diverse of artists and audiences as you can. And I think one of the kind of the takeaways was there's a number of different partners that we can engage in our booking processes. And there are some that I came into the process knowing very well, just because I go to the conferences and I read the trades, and we have promoters that we work with already. And then there were some other kind of ways we could go that I wasn't aware of. So just the vast amount of different partners and partnerships that we have before us is really kind of exciting. And that was one big takeaway for me, is just that opportunity to start understanding and building relationships in a broader way in the booking industry. And I think really, other than that, I would say that there were some redundancies that were uncovered, that although I knew that they existed, I think it really helped us pinpoint where they were and really make a clear plan on how we could come out of this with a much cleaner structure and a much more efficient structure. So
Sure.
that was another big takeaway.
Okay, no, those are great. I know we're kind of running up on our time, but I do want to give Mubarka and AB a final chance to talk. So Mubarka, what advice would you have for anybody that wants to undertake an organizational review if they want to, whether that's your process or what AB does or what Kim has done? What one thing would you advise somebody that's going to undertake that?
Just building off of what Kim said there, I think the most important thing that we all learned through this process was that this shouldn't be a one-off exercise. I think it throws people off, creates unnecessary hostility within the organization. Just even from the perspective of strategic planning, I think it should be built into that strategic planning cycle. So every 4 or 3, whatever your cycle is, if it's 3 years or 4 years, once within that cycle, it should almost be part of your process to review your organizational design and go through that. One, if it's communicated upfront, I think it reduces the amount of hostility people feel in the process for sure. And secondly, kind of starts getting embedded into the culture, as you alluded to that as well, Kim and Antony. So I think that creating that would have probably been the biggest kind of takeaway and learning lesson for us, is that we should do it more frequently, and it should be something that all employees are cognizant of, that it's part of the organizational's mandate to be reviewing jobs and roles and realigning themselves to attain maximum efficiencies.
Okay, yeah, that's great. And before I get to Antony, if any of you have any questions, please use the Q&A button, and when you hover your cursor over and it pops up, please use that, and we'll definitely get to them. Antony, what were your biggest takeaways during your process? Would you do anything different, and what advice do you have for folks undertaking this?
Well, again, yeah, I think my co-panelists answered a lot of the strategic elements of it. So I'm going to focus again on people, and primarily yourself, right, as a decision maker. Like, there's a lot of emotion that gets put into these, and so as an emotional guy, I've had to use emotional intelligence to calm myself to make the right decisions. You're going to feel pressure from especially if you're in a position where you have a board that's asking for one thing and you're responsible for staff, like a lot of us are. You want to take care of your people, but you also want to take care of yourself and make sure that you don't lose a job in the whole process. So it's an emotional aspect of what we just went through, and I think if you're not honest with yourself, we all need help, and I think surrounding yourself with, whether it's VSG or I mean, Kim, I get to do it for free. I just call Russ for free, so I'll tell you how to do that moving forward. You have to surround yourself with good people who advise you and help you, to make the best decision. And then when you make the decision, just stand by it and go forward. You cannot look back. You cannot go backwards and say, what if I did this? What if I did that? You made the decision, move forward with it. And then if you haven't made a decision that in your gut or in your observation, you realize may not be the right decision, and stand up and say it was the wrong decision and correct it. Don't just let it continue to fester over time. I've been fortunate over the 11 years that I've been here. I've had very limited turnover, and a lot of the turnover I had have been people who've gone on to great opportunities, whether it's Hallie Yavich, who's gone to the Staples Center, or Brian Herbert, who went to the Warriors building. I mean, I'm very proud of those people. I'm very proud that they had the opportunity to go, and take an opportunity somewhere else. And so I think, again, a lot of it comes down to being in the business and trying. I know we always say don't work on the business, work it, whatever the saying is, but you have to be connected as a leader and you have to understand what's going on. And I personally have made some mistakes in that front by being too busy on one thing that I wasn't able to focus on my people and the staff. And so coming out of this, the lesson learned that I have is that no matter how busy I am, I'm going to try to make sure that I stay connected to my team and make sure that I'm giving them what they need every day, even when it's just a kick in the ass every once in a while. So.
Yeah. Well, before I let Russ have a last word, we've done a lot of these kind of exercises and some key things I'd like to just impart to the group. For an exercise like this to be successful, whether it's with somebody from the outside or internally, the first thing you got to have is leadership buy-in. If your top person doesn't really believe this is effective, then everything you find out and any kind of change you want to make later on is going to probably be met with some resistance. So having a leader that says, yep, I want to do this. I mean, I may not be the one involved in it, but yes, go forward and do that is critical. Staff buy-in is important. It's not a deal breaker in getting the process done. Like Mubarka said, she had some folks that were, I guess, not exactly enthusiastic about going through the process, but that doesn't stop you from going through with it. But one of the most important things is at the end is that there is follow through. We've done this exercise where the information comes out, the work is done, and the leader said, "Nah, I'm not going to do that." Even though I told everybody we would make changes if they were appropriate, I'm just not going to do it. And there's nothing worse than as a culture killer than a leader who says one thing and then does something else. And probably everybody on here has had that at some point. And so now it looks like we do have one question that I see that I'd like to, I'll read out here to everybody from Tammy Sweeney. She says, one of the challenges we're facing is adapting the organizational structure to a world that is unknown. We don't know how events will emerge or when, so we're in a holding pattern. We continue to review the structure and look at scenarios that may happen, and the structure will look different depending on which scenarios happen. I think we've done best to care for our people and our organization, short and long term, but want to plan for reopening in the best way. Some positions will change. Understanding how is key. Do you have any suggestions? Am I going to pick somebody, or do I get a volunteer? Anthony?
I'll volunteer a little bit, and if it doesn't work, please don't come after me. But I think first of all, you have to know that the world is changing and the world will change. So looking at positions that you currently have, technology, and technology is going to be a big thing. So like I'll lose our box office for an example. At some point along the way, we may not need them in holistic fashion. We may not need as many people. And so I think looking at technology and how that impacts your individual situation is obviously going to impact your decisions here. Where you live, what your state guidance is. Like for us, we have 4,000 people in our building every day. And yet because we have 4,000 people, we're staffed as if we have 20,000 people, because we have to maintain mask ordinance and we have to open up every door and we have to do all the things. So, I think your individual situation is going to help you guide as to where you're going. If you're in Texas or you're in Florida, obviously you can do whatever you want to do at this point. So I think looking at your current situation, where you live, where your state guidance is, and then being able to forecast out, what that's going to ultimately result in. If you think they're going to allow you to open up as 20% or 30% or what that is, it will be helpful. I think technology is the biggest thing that you should be paying attention to, and how that's ultimately going to either add staff or change the dynamic of your staff and what that ultimately looks like. So I'm hoping that helps a little bit, and happy to engage even personally beyond this, if you need.
Thanks, Anthony, and thanks, Tammy, for the question. Russ, would you like to close us out?
Yeah, I'd love to just weigh in, and a deep personal appreciation to the panelists, Mubarka, Kim, and Anthony. Great insight from different perspectives. In our industry, we face the challenge of trying to provide information from the smallest facilities to the largest facilities, and recognizing a variety of groups have different resources and capabilities. But at the end of the day, the underlying themes through this discussion are the same, no matter where you're located. How your process and what resources you have to go through it might be changing. But I heard some things that really stimulate thinking. I love the concept of honest conversation. And to have a conversation, that means that you have to have an honest conversation with yourself first and say, hey, am I willing to open my mind, and in some cases my heart, to what I learned. So the honest conversation starts internally first before it goes externally. And to your point, the idea that anybody would undertake something and not complete it, I can't think of something that will undermine a culture sort of more than that happening. I also thought it was fascinating about how all three of our panelists looked at data different. Mubarka looked at things in sort of what I'm just going to call like she sought hard data with which to make decisions. And one of the biggest changes in our industry over the course of the last 20 years, and more so each and every year as we go forward, is the idea of, and I'm guilty of this, I used to manage by sort of my gut instinct, or what I was taught by the people before me who didn't use data. And I feel bad about all the money I've poured out of these buildings because I did what I thought was right versus taking the time and the extra effort to make sure that I knew sort of what I should be doing and when. I'll give it just a quick example. For the longest time, we thought that we should pre-cool a building in a Texas marketplace. We had to start at noon to do that. But with real data, we learned that, you only have to do that till 4 o'clock. And so I guess the electric company should thank me for about 3 hours of massive pre-cooling that actually did absolutely nothing for the enterprise other than cost it money. And so, again, that's part of the concept of an honest conversation, in the fact that I know something different today that I didn't know before. And now, and you change your behavior. The hard data, seeking hard data like Mubarka, and then going to empirical data, the things that you know, and Antony's description of, sort of recognizing that there's something fuzzy going on and you're busy and we're all stretched too thin and none of us are over-resourced. And then realizing that, something's gone along farther than it should. And that means that there's going to be extra effort, extra cost, and extra consequences to actually attacking that and making the changes. And then looking at Kim saying, well, holy Toledo, I was this, now I'm going to be that. How do I be that? And whether that's an internal process. And listen, sometimes a third party is appropriate and sometimes it's not. There are lots of capable people in our organizations, and I doubt that any of us use our organizational resources to their fullest extent. So I guess I would say that the first thing is to say that this is important, and do what you can with what you have. If it's going to be an internal process, then great. And then you also have relationships in the marketplace, not necessarily in public assembly facilities, but in other like businesses and hospitality and convention and leisure, some of those other things. You can bring people back in, and sort of create your own third party, which is a way to think, well, I don't have all the resources of one group, perhaps I have resources that I can use. And so I love the discussion about the different processes, because as Tom said in the very beginning, this is going to be unique to you and your own your operating circumstances. And the other thing Antony said that I think Kim and Mubarka, and certainly Tom and I and others were associated, agree, is that pick up the phone. I've never had a situation in this industry where someone either called me or I called someone else, and they didn't sort of stop what they were doing to try to help me and get an answer. And I try to pay that forward each and every day. So you shouldn't think that you're alone out there. There's lots of opportunity with which to get some of the help that you need. So Tom, we have a new question.
Yeah, our friend here at TPAC, Denise Minatoy, asked about putting the location of the recordings, past webinars in the chat. I'm going to have to defer to our webinar gurus to do that, but they will be on a YouTube channel. We will. I don't want to overcommit, but we will figure out a way to get. We have everybody's email addresses. We will get you the appropriate link if we can't get that put in there. But they will be available on a VSG Advantage Training YouTube channel. in the next few days. And I see somebody's typing an answer. So if you can hold on just a second.
Hey, Tom, this is Richard. So later today, everybody that signed up for the webinar will receive an email from us with the video link in it. And then we've been able in the past to post other information that people want. It's all free, and we hope you'll pass it on to others. This was a terrific panel as well, but you'll all get the link today, and anybody that doesn't have it can just send a note to myself and we'll forward that. But you can also just forward the link to anybody once you have it, and they'll have access.
That link also includes, we did 6 of these free webinars back in June. We have this group of 6 now. So every webinar that we've done is free and available on that YouTube channel. And listen, we encourage you to share that with anybody sort of in your organization or in your marketplace. The whole point of this and the collaboration with IAVM, and again, appreciate Mark stepping in today, is just to try to share information that we hope has value to each and every participant, because we all need each other's help going forward. That's all it's about. So in the absence of no additional questions, we find ourselves miraculously right on time. So I want to thank each and of our panelists. I certainly want to thank Tom and Mike, my partners in VSG. And it's appropriate to call out Richard Anderson and Adam Cook, the folks who have been sort of as Tom said, the guru of our webinars, really mastered the technology and made sure that we could make this as smooth and as easy to each and every one of you. We remain out here and able to support you in any way that is appropriate. We're not lawyers. We don't charge to talk to you. So thanks, and be safe out there. Cheers.
Thank you, everybody.